We're going to read something. This is actually quite interesting. Some of these books are long, some of them are short. But we are going to read the introduction just because I want to read something. This is Skeleton Crew. So I'm going to read you guys. This is quite great. This is the Skeleton Crew introduction. Wait. My coffee? Is it hot? Then heat it up another minute. Wait. Just a few minutes. I want to talk to you. And then I'm going to kiss you. Wait. 1. Here's some more short stories if you want them. They span a long period of my life. The oldest, The Reaper's Image, was written when I was 18, in the summer before I started college. I thought of the idea, as a matter of fact, when I was out in the backyard of our house in West Durham, Maine. I had hiccups. Shooting baskets with my brother and reading it over again made me feel a little sad for those old times. The most recent, The Battle of the Flexible Bullet, was finished in November of 1983. That is the span of 17 years and does not count as much, I suppose, if put in comparison with such long and rich careers as those enjoyed by writers as diverse as Graham Greene, Somerset Maugham, Mark Twain, and Eudora Welty. But it is a longer time than Stephen Crane had, and about the same length as the span of H.P. Lovecraft's career. A friend of mine asked me a year or two ago why I still bother. My novels, he pointed out, were making very good money, while the short stories were actually losers. How do you figure that? I asked. He tapped the then current issue of Playboy, which had occasioned this discussion. My meds that I just took. That's my alarm. And had pointed it out. Oh, wait. Which had occasioned this discussion. I had a story in it, Word Processor of the Gods, which you'll find in here someplace. And had pointed it out to him with what I thought was justifiable pride. Well, I'll show you, he said, if you don't mind telling me how much you got for the piece. Well, I don't mind, I said. I got $2,000. Not exactly chicken dirt Wyatt. His name isn't really Wyatt, but I don't want to embarrass him. You can dig that. No, you didn't get $2,000, Wyatt said. I didn't. Have you been looking at my bank book? Nope. But I know you got $1,800 for it because your agent gets 10%. Damn right, I said. He deserves it. He got me in Playboy. I've always wanted to have a story in Playboy. So it was $1,800 instead of $2,000. Big deal. No, you got $1,710. What? Well, didn't you tell me your business manager gets 5% of the net? Well, okay, $1,800 less $90. I still think $1,710 is not bad for, except it wasn't. The sadist pushed on. It was really a measly $855. What? You want me to tell you? You want to tell me you're not in a 50% tax bracket, Steve-O? I was silent. He knew I was. And, he said gently, it was really just about $7.69.50, wasn't it? I nodded reluctantly. Maine has an income tax which requires residents in my bracket to pay 10% of their federal taxes to the state. 10% of $855 is $85.50. How long did it take you to write this story? Wyatt persisted. About a week, I said ungraciously. It was really more like 2 with a couple of rewrites added in, but I wasn't going to tell Wyatt that. So you made $769.50 that week, he said. You know how much a plumber makes per week in New York, Steve-O? No, I said. I hate people who call me Steve-O. And neither do you. Sure I do, he said. About $769.50 after taxes. And so as far as I can see, what you got there is a dead loss. He laughed like hell and then asked if I had any more beer in the fridge. I said no. I'm going to send good buddy Wyatt a copy of this book with a little note. The note will say, I'm not going to tell you how much I was paid for this book, but I'll tell you this, Wyatt. My total take on Word Processor of the Gods, net, is now just over $2,300, not even counting the $769.50 you heave-hawed so over at my house.
Here you go, Mom.
At the lake.
Can you move that?
Yep.
No, I'm talking about your mug.
Right here. I will sign the note, Steve-O, and add a P.S. There really was more beer in the fridge, and I drank it myself after you were gone that day. That ought to fix him. 2. Except it's not the money. I'll admit I got bowled over to be paid $2,000 for Word Processor of the Gods. But I was equally as bowled over to be paid $40 for the Reaper's Image when it was published in Startling Mysteries Stories, or to be sent 12 contributors' copies when Here There Be Tygers was published in Ubris, the University of Maine College Literary Magazine. I am of a kindly nature and have always assumed that Ubris was a Cockney way of saying hubris. I mean, you're glad of the money. Let us not descend into total fantasy here, or at least not yet. When I began to publish short fiction in men's magazines such as Cavalier, Dude, and Atom with some regularity, I was 25 and my wife was 23. We had one child and another on the way. I was working 50, 60 hours a week in a laundry and making $1.75 an hour. Budget is not exactly the word for whatever it was we were on. It was more like a modified version of the Bataan Death March. The checks for those stories, on publication, never on acceptance, always seemed to come just in time to buy antibiotics for the baby's ear infection, or to keep the telephone in the apartment for another record-breaking month. Money is, let us face it, very handy and very heady. As Lily Kavanaugh says in The Talisman, and it was Peter Straub's line, not mine, you can never be too thin or too rich, and if you don't believe it, you were never really fat or really poor. All the same, you don't do it for money, or you're a monkey. You don't think of the bottom line, or you're a monkey. You don't think of it in terms of hourly wage, yearly wage, even lifetime wage, or you're a monkey. In the end, you don't even do it for love, although it would be nice to think so. You do it because to not do it is suicide. And while this is tough, there are compensations I could never tell Wyatt about, because he is not that kind of guy. Take Word Processor of the Gods as a for instance. Not the best story I ever wrote, not one that's ever going to win any prizes, but it's not too bad either. Sort of fun. I had just gotten my own word processor a month before. It's a big wang and keep your smart comments to yourself. What do you say? And I was still exploring what it could and couldn't do. In particular, I was fascinated with the insert and delete buttons, which made cross-outs and carrots almost obsolete. I caught myself a nasty little bug one day. What the hell happens to the best of us? Everything inside me that wasn't nailed down came out from one end or the other. Most of it at roughly the speed of sound. By nightfall, I felt very bad indeed. Chills, fever, joints full of spun glass. Most of the muscles of my stomach were sprung, and my head ached. I spent that night in the guest bedroom, which is only 4 running steps from the bathroom, and slept from 9 until about 2 in the morning. I woke up knowing that it was for the night. I only stayed in bed because I was too sick to get up. So there I lay, and I got thinking about my word processor and insert and delete, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny if this guy wrote a sentence, and then, when he pushed delete, the subject of the sentence was deleted from the world? That's the way just about all of my stories start. Wouldn't it be funny if? And while many of them are scary, I never told one to people as opposed to writing it down. That didn't cause at least some laughter, no matter what I saw as the final intent of the story. Anyway, I started imagining on delete to begin with, not exactly making up a story so much as seeing pictures in my head. I was watching this guy who was always to me just the I guy until the story actually starts coming out in words, when you have to give him a name. Delete pictures hanging on the wall and chairs in the living room in New York City and the concept of war. Then I thought of having him insert things and having those things just pop into the world. Then I thought, so give him a wife that's bad to the bone. He can delete her, maybe, and someone else who's good to maybe insert. And then I fell asleep, and the next morning I was pretty much okay again. The bug went away, but the story didn't. I wrote it, and you'll see it didn't turn out exactly as the foregoing might suggest, but then they never do. I don't need to draw you a picture, do I? You don't do it for money. You do it because it saves you from feeling bad. A man or woman able to turn his or her back on something like that is just a monkey. That's all. The story paid me by letting me get back to sleep when I felt as if I couldn't. I paid the story back by getting it concrete, which it wanted to be. The rest is just side effects. 3. I hope you'll like this book, constant reader. I suspect you won't like it as well as you would a novel, because most of you have forgotten the real pleasures of the short story. Reading a good, long novel is in many ways like having a long and satisfying affair. I can remember commuting between Maine and Pittsburgh during the making of Creepshow, and going mostly by car because of my fear of flying, coupled with the air traffic controller's strike and Mr. Reagan's subsequent firing of the strikes. Reagan, it appears, is really only an ardent unionist if the unions in question are in Poland. I had a reading of The Thornbirds by Colleen McCullough on 8 cassette tapes, and for the space of about 5 weeks, I wasn't even having an affair with that novel. I felt married to it. My favorite part was when the wicked old lady rotted and sprouted maggots in about 16 hours. A short story is a different thing altogether. A short story is like a quick kiss in the dark from a stranger. That is not, of course, the same thing as an affair or a marriage. But kisses can be sweet, and their very verity forms their own attraction. Writing short stories hasn't gotten easier for me over the years. It's gotten harder. The time to do them has shrunk, for one thing. They keep wanting to bloat, for another. I have a real problem with bloat. I write like Fat Lady's Diet. And it seems harder to find the voice for these tales. All too often, the I guy just floats away. The thing to do is to keep trying, I think. It's better to keep kissing and get your face slapped a few times than it is to give up altogether. 4. All right. That's just about it from this end. Can I thank a few people? You can skip this part if you want to. Thanks to Bill Thompson for getting this going. He and I put Night Shift, the first book of short stories, together, and it was his idea to do this one. He moved on to Arbor House since, but I love him just as well there as anywhere else. If there really is a gentleman left in the gentleman's profession of book publishing, it's this guy. God bless your Irish heart, Bill. Thanks to Phyllis Gran at Putnam for taking up the slack. Thanks to Kirby McCauley, my agent, another Irishman, who sold most of these and who pulled the longest of them, the mist, out of me with a chain fall. This is starting to sound like an Academy Awards acceptance speech, but fuck it. Thanks are due to magazine editors as well. Kathy Sagan at Redbook, Alice Turner at Playboy, Nye Wilden at Caliver, the folks at Yankee, and Ed Furman, my man, at Fantasy and Science Fiction. I owe just about everybody, and I could name them, but I won't bore you with any more. Most thanks are to you, constant reader, just like always, because all goes out to you in the end. Without you, it's a dead circuit. If any of these do it for you, take you away, get you over the boring lunch hour, the plane ride, or the hour in detention hall for throwing spitballs, that's the paycheck. 5. Okay, commercial's over. Grab onto my arm now, hold tight. We are going into a number of dark places, and I think I know the way. Just don't let go of my arm, and if I should kiss you in the dark, it's no big deal. It's only because you are my love. Now listen. April 15th, 1984, Bangor, Maine. Skeleton Crew. So, I think I'm actually going to delete that last video that I did, and we're going to start over on that one. So what I'm going to do is we're going to restart, because I really do like doing the live chats. I don't see any reason to keep things that aren't going to make any sense later. Especially the last video apparently was echoing, so it's really not going to do any good. So what I'm going to do is when I go through to edit, I will probably edit and do like my intro for Here Be Tigers, and then turn around and do intro for Flunky and anything else that I want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to back up to Here Be Tigers. I mean, I got pretty far in when I found out that it was echoing, which really sucks. It really, really does. It's not going to do anybody any good to hear an echoing story that's going echo, echo, echo. You know what I mean? So, there is notes that I can read on each story if y'all want. We have read The Mist. Oh, my bookmark's back there. Okay. We have read The Mist before. And it's, I'm going to put that there. And it's the one about the, extra-dimensional creatures that cause people to be stuck in the market. So here's some notes. We're going to do notes on The Mist, since we've already read that one. Then I'm going to read the notes on Here There Be Tigers, and then we'll go from there. So, not everyone is interested in where short stories come from, and that is perfectly proper. You don't have to understand the internal combustion engine to drive a car, and you don't need to know the circumstances which surrounded the making of a story to get a bit of pleasure from it. Engines interest mechanics. The creator of stories interests academics, fans, and snoops. The first and the last are almost synonymous, but never mind. I've included a few notes here on a few of the stories, such things as I thought might interest the casual reader. But if you're even more casual, I assure you that you can close the book without a qualm. You won't be missing much. Mist. This was written in the summer of 1976 for an anthology of new stories being put together by my agent, Kirby McCauley. McCauley had created another book of this sort called Frights 2 or 3 years previous. That book was a paperback. This one was to be a hardcover and much more ambitious in scope. It was called Dark Forces. Kirby wanted a story from me, and he pursued that story with doggedness and determination, and a kind of gentle diplomacy that is, I think, the hallmark of a really good agent. I couldn't think of a thing. The harder I thought, the more easily nothing came. I began to think that maybe the short story machine in my head was temporarily or permanently broken. Then came the storm, which was much as described in this story. At the height of it, there was indeed a waterspout on Long Lake in Bridgeton, where we were living at the time, and I did insist that my family come downstairs with me for a while. Although my wife's name is Tabitha, Stephanie is her sister's name. The trip to the supermarket the next day was also much as described in the story, although I was spared the company of such an odious creature as Norton in the real world. The people living in Norton's summer cottage were a very pleasant doctor, Ralph Drews, and his wife. In the market, my muse suddenly shat on my head. This happened, as it always does, suddenly and with no warning. I was halfway down the middle aisle for hot dog buns, imagined a big prehistoric bird flapping its way toward the meat counter and back, knocking over cans of pineapple chunks and bottles of tomato sauce. By the time my son Joe and I were in the checkout lane, I was amusing myself with the story about all these people trapped in the supermarket surrounded by prehistoric animals. I thought it was wildly funny, what the Alamo would have been like if directed by Bert I. Gordon. I wrote half the story that night and the rest the following week. It got a little long, but Kirby thought it was good, and it went into the book. I never liked it that much until the rewrite. I particularly didn't like David Drayton sleeping with Amanda and then never finding out what happened to his wife. That seemed cowardly to me. But in the rewrite, I discovered a rhythm of language that I liked, and keeping that rhythm in mind, I was able to peel the story down to its basics more successfully than with some of my other long stories. Apt Pupil in Different Seasons is a particularly good example of this disease I have, literary elephantitis. The real key to this rhythm lay in the deliberate use of the story's first line, which I simply stole from Douglas Fairbairn's brilliant novel Shoot. The line is for me, the essence of all story, a kind of Zen incantation. I must tell you that I also liked the metaphor implied in David Drayton's discovery of his own limitations, and I liked the story's cheery cheesiness. You're supposed to see this one in black and white, with your arm around your girlfriend's shoulders, or your guy's, and a big speaker stuck in the window. You make up the second feature. He stole the first line of the story from Douglas Fairbairn's brilliant novel Shoot. This is what happened. That's the first line of the story. Alright, now, as far as Here There Be Tigers, okay, this one is kind of, the story itself, if you don't understand it from the first grader's point of view, which I didn't at first, and then when I think about it now, it's like, oh my god, why didn't I think of that? Here There Be Tigers. My first grade teacher in Stamford, Connecticut was Mrs. Van Buren. She was pretty scary. I guess if a tiger had come along and eaten her up, I could have gotten behind that. You know how kids are. And that is what that story is about. It's about a tiger in a bathroom, which they call the basement, which is what's funny. You know, this coffee I haven't had since this morning. I've been trying to drink it since. It's too hot, but it keeps the gnats out. I gotta put my book down. So, ooh, try that. Okay, so I am going to go to Here There Be Tigers. And so that I can separate this from the rest of it, we're going to start out as I usually do. Welcome to the Reader's Nook. I am Lady Rain, and today we are going to read Be Tigers, and we are going to look at possibly starting Monkey And if not, we will do the monkey either tonight or tomorrow. So I have been live streaming off and on since probably 1 o'clock ish. Yeah. And it's now like 5. So yeah, I probably will read a little bit of these and then I will go ahead and end for today and then come back tomorrow. So we'll see how far we get. Here there be tigers. Charles needed to go to the bathroom very badly. There was no longer any use in trying to fool himself that he could wait for recess. His bladder was screaming at him, and Ms. Bird had caught him squirming. There were 3 third-grade teachers in the Acorn Street Grammar School. Miss Kinney was young and blonde and bouncy and had a boyfriend who picked her up after school in a blue Camaro. Miss Trask was shaped like a Moorish pillow and did her hair in braids and laughed boomingly. And there was Miss Bird. Charles had known he would end up with Miss Bird. He had known that. It had been inevitable. Because Miss Bird obviously wanted to destroy him. She did not allow children to go to the basement. The basement, Miss Bird said, was where the boilers were kept, and well-groomed ladies and gentlemen would never go down there, because basements were nasty, sooty old things. Young ladies and gentlemen do not go to the basement, she said. They go to the bathroom. Charles squirmed again. Miss Bird cocked an eye at him. Charles, she said clearly, still pointing her pointer at Bolivia, do you need to go to the bathroom? Kathy Scott in the seat ahead of him giggled, wisely covering her mouth. Kenny Griffen sniggered and kicked Charles under his desk. Charles went bright red. Speak up, Charles, Miss Bird said brightly. Do you need to? Urinate? She'll say urinate. She always does. Yes, Miss Bird. Yes, what? I have to go to the bathroom. Miss Bird smiled. Very well, Charles. You may go to the bathroom and urinate. Is that what you need to do? Urinate? Charles hung his head, convicted. Very well, Charles, you may do so, but next time, kindly don't wait to be asked. General giggles. Miss Bird rapped the board with her pointer. Charles trudged up the road toward the door, 30 pairs of eyes boring into his back, and every one of those kids, including Kathy Scott, knew that he was going to the bathroom to urinate. The door was at least a football field's length away. Miss Bird did not go on with the lesson, but kept her silence until he had opened the door, entered the blessedly empty hall, and shut the door again. He walked down toward the boys' bathroom. Basement, basement, basement if I want! Dragging his fingers along the cool tile of the wall, letting them bounce over the thumbtack-stippled bulletin board and slide lightly across the red "Break glass in case of emergency" fire alarm box. Miss Bird liked it. Miss Bird liked making him have a red face in front of Kathy Scott, who never had to go to the basement. Was it fair? And everybody else? Old B-I-T-C-H, he thought. He spelled because he had decided last year God didn't say it was a sin if you spelled. He went into the boys' bathroom. It was very cool inside, with a faint, not unpleasant smell of chlorine hanging pungently in the air. Now, in the middle of the morning, it was clean and deserted, peaceful and pleasant. Not at all like the smoky, stinky cubicle at the Star Theater downtown. The bathroom basement was built like an L. The short side lined with tiny square mirrors and white porcelain wash bowls and a paper towel dispenser. NIBROC, Nebraska. The longer side with 2 urinals and 3 toilet cubicles. Charles went around the corner after glancing morosely at his thin, rather pallid face in one of the mirrors. The tiger was laying down at the far end, just underneath the pebbly white window. It was a large tiger with tawny Venetian blinds and dark stripes laid across its pelt. It looked up alertly at Charles, and its green eyes narrowed. of silky, purring grunt issued from its mouth. Smooth muscles flexed, and the tiger got to its feet. Its tail switched, making little chinking sounds against the porcelain side of the last urinal. The tiger looked quite hungry and very vicious. Charles hurried back the way he had come. The door seemed to take forever to wheeze pneumatically closed behind him, and when it did, he considered himself safe. The door only swung in, and he could not remember ever reading or hearing the Tygers are smart enough to open doors. Charles wiped the back of his hand across his nose. His heart was thumping so hard he could hear it. He still needed to go to the basement. Worse than ever. He squirmed, winced, and pressed a hand against his belly. He really had to go to the basement. And if he could only be sure no one would come, he could use the girls. It was right across the hall. Charles looked at it longingly, knowing he could never dare. Years. What if Kathy Scott should, or Black Horror, what if Miss Bird should come? Perhaps he had imagined the tiger. He opened the door wide enough for one eye and peeked in. The tiger was peeking back around the corner, around the angle of the L, its eye a sparkling green. Charles fancied he could see a tiny blue fleck in that deep brilliance, as if the tiger's eye had eaten one of his own. As if. A hand slid around his neck. Charles gave a stifled cry and felt his heart and stomach cramp up in his throat. For one terrible moment he thought he was going to wet himself. It was Kenny Griffen, smiling complacently. Miss Bird sent me after you, 'cause you've been gone 6 years. You're in trouble. Yeah, but I can't go to the basement, Charles said, feeling faint with the fright Kenny had given him. You're constipated, Kenny chortled gleefully. Wait till I tell Kathy. You better not, Charles said urgently. Besides, I'm not. There's a tiger in there. What's he doing? Kenny asked. Taking a piss? I don't know, Charles said, turning his face to the wall. I just wish he'd go away. He began to weep. Hey, Kenny said, bewildered and a little frightened. Hey, what if I have to go? What if I can't help it? Miss Bird will say... Come on, Kenny said, grabbing his arm with one hand and pushing the door open with the other. You're making it up. They were inside before Charles, terrified, could break free and cower back against the door. Tiger, Kenny said disgustedly. Boy, Miss Bird's gonna kill you. It's around the other side. Kenny began to walk past the wash bowls. Kitty, kitty, kitty. Kitty! Don't! Charles hissed. Kenny, kitty, 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 kit. Charles darted out the door again and pressed himself against the wall, waiting, his hands covering his mouth and his eyes squinched shut, waiting for the scream. There was no scream. He had no idea how long he stood there frozen, his bladder bursting. He looked at the door to the boys' basement. It told him nothing. It was just a door. He couldn't, but at last he went in. The wash bowls and mirrors were neat, and the faint smell of chlorine was unchanged. But there seemed to be a smell under it, a faint, unpleasant smell, like freshly sheared copper. With groaning, with silent trepidation, he went to the corner of the L and peeped around. The tiger was sprawled on the floor, licking its large paws with a long pink tongue. It looked incuriously at Charles. There was a torn piece of shirt caught in one set of claws. Miss Bird. Oh, wait. But his need was a white agony now, and he couldn't help it. He had to. Charles tiptoed back to the white porcelain basin closest to the door. Miss Bird slammed in just to see the zip in his pants. Why, you dirty, filthy little boy, she said, almost reflectively. Charles was keeping a weathered eye on the corner. I'm sorry, Miss Bird. The tiger. I'm going to clean the sink. I'll use soap. I swear I will. Where's Kenneth? Miss Bird asked calmly. I don't know. He didn't really. Is he back there? No! Charles cried. Miss Bird stalked to the place where the room bent. Come here, Kenneth, right this moment. Miss Bird! But Miss Bird was already around the corner. She meant to pounce. Charles thought Miss Bird was about to find out what pouncing was really all about. He went out the door again. He got a drink at the drinking fountain. He looked at the American flag hanging over the entrance to the gym. He looked at the bulletin board. Woodsy Owl said, "Give a hoot, don't pollute." Officer Friendly said, "Never ride with strangers." Charles read everything twice. Then he went back to the classroom, walked down his row to his seat with his eyes on the floor, and slid into his seat. It was 11:15. He took out Roads to Everywhere and began to read about Bill at the rodeo. How do you like that? The mind of a third grader. The mind of a grader. Imagine that teacher that was really mean and got eaten by a tiger. Never have to deal with him again. So, that is Here They're Tigers. So, we're going to stop there. It's a short story, but so I'll put this video up for anybody that just wants a small, short little story. Until then, y'all have a good night. Alright, so we're going to stop there.